Hello and welcome to GL Coding Chart of Accounts training presented by Eastern Seals University. In order to successfully understand this training, you will need to print the documents that were noted on the screen before you started the video. You can either rewind, pause the video, and go to those documents, but what I'll do is show you how to get to them if you wanted to go to them now. You would have to be on your remote desktop. So you go onto your remote desktop, you select Corporate Library, Accounting and Financial, Accounting Forms and Procedures, and then you look for the Excel sheet called Chart of Accounts. When you open it, it's going to look like this. There's two tabs. You have a Location and Service Code tab. You'll need to print that information. And then you have the GL, or General Ledger Code tab. You would need to print that information as well. You would need these forms for part of the training, but it's also wise to keep them for future use as well. This training, you'll learn why we use a chart of accounts and general ledger coding. You'll also learn the different parts of the GL coding that you usually write on your receipts, enter on your purchase orders, as well as on your new hire and payroll forms, and why that coding is important. So what is a chart of accounts? Well, a chart of accounts is a list of accounts that a company uses to organize all of the forms of income and expenses that the company has. This consists of general ledger accounts, which categorize the income, also known as revenue, that the organization receives, as well as the expenses that are paid out. Being able to organize the money earned and spent in categories helps the organization to budget for future years more efficiently, and also helps to identify trends. Our organization also subcategorizes by location and service code. Since we have so many programs across the state, being able to identify which location or service is producing the most revenue or expenses helps with the budgeting process, as well as when having to make tough decisions with regards to programming. Eastern Seals Florida account code structure uses the GL code first, which consists of 5 numbers. This code identifies either where the revenue came from, or it classifies the expense, followed by the location code, which corresponds to the location of the program, and then the service code, which is 2 numbers. This is used to break down the revenue or expense even further to determine what service it relates to. And then we have the grant code for some locations. So in this example, shown here, the location is Amar. The Amar Child Care Center is ordering supplies, program supplies, and for this particular example, the grant used is the BOCC grant, so they have to select the 600 code to identify those expenses separately. Treasure Codes also has a few grant codes that must be used. If your program has grant codes to use, however, you will be notified by accounting. You'll be using this code structure frequently because it's needed on every receipt, purchase order, new hire information, and payroll change request. We'll discuss these in more detail later. The accuracy of this is very important because each program and service code has a budget for the fiscal year, and using the wrong coding could cause income or expenses to be coded to the wrong location, thus causing the program to be over or under budget. Each month, accounting will compile all of the revenue and expenses for the company based on the cash receipts and purchase orders that you create, and organize the information into what is called financial statements. When reviewing financial statements for your location, if this is one of your responsibilities, it's good to review the income that is recorded as well as monitor the expenses, because the program's bottom line is the income minus the expenses, which shows what your program either profited or lost for the month. This slide shows the relationship between the revenue and the expense. If the expenses are more than the revenue that comes into the company, then the financials have a negative balance, as illustrated here. The scale is tipping over because there's more expenses than revenue. Of course, in our day-to-day life, if this happened, we would have to cut some costs. So, we would think that way with the organization as well. Our goal as a nonprofit organization is to have a balanced scale. So now we're going to be talking briefly about revenue. There are many different forms of income received by the organization. For instance, we have payment for services that can come from government funding, from contracts, insurance payments, and even private pay. But we also have fundraising revenue. Some of the events that the development team puts together, like PAIR, Get Down to Business, stewardship. Some are required to donate regularly because of their position, or special gifts when people decide, or companies or organizations decide to make special donations to the organization. But then we also have grants and donations, which normally, a program or our grant specialist will, see something that may benefit the organization, and they'll request money, and then that will be a grant that will come into the organization. Some programs may only receive government funding, while others may also receive private pay income. It just depends on the program. Now, so income and revenue. When receiving payments for services from different sources, the payments are usually recorded in one of our AR accounts listed below. And the reason for this is because we're able to track whether payments are received by looking in that AR account to see if the money is there. So we're going to, now if you want to take your printout labeled General Ledger Account Codes, and I'm going to pull one up on the screen as well. So it should look like this, what you printed out. Now, if you notice at the top, there are a list of accounts receivable codes. All of the AR accounts usually start with 0, and next to them are the descriptions. For most of the organizational programs, when receiving payments from contracts, government funding, or insurance, it is coded to the 01416 account called ARMIP, because it is in the AR software that accounting uses to put all the charges and payments. There is an exception for programs in Naples and Camp. These programs have their own separate AR accounts, and all of their payments are recorded in their specific AR account. All of the AR accounts use location 0000 and service code 00. So if you notice here, you see Camp. Camp, it has its own, and then you have Naples that has its own. But all of the other ones usually go into 01416. Now let's look back at that at the second page. So if you go back to your chart of accounts to page 2, so I'm going to just skip down to page 2. There's a section called Program Service Fees Individuals. If you have a private pay, so for instance, some of our programs receive private pay payments from some of the clients, and this is the account that they would put that into. This is where they would code it to. The only programs that do not do this would be Naples and Camp, because they have their own AR account. Each event has its own revenue code. When receiving donations and payments, we have to distinguish which event or which area of development the revenue came from. So that's why we use different general ledger codes for the revenue accounts for the development team. Now let's look back at that general ledger detail, that chart of accounts. Now if we just scroll down, scroll up, there are right under income accounts, it's on page 1, you'll see mail campaigns, all the way from mail campaigns all the way down to to miscellaneous income. To bequest. All the way down to bequest. Those are all the accounts. They're all labeled different events, sponsorship, donations, and grants, and they can be used to categorize the different fundraising. The reason for this separation is to allow development to analyze the amount of income that was raised for each event to see which ones are successful and which ones may need to be revamped. The reason for the last few slides and discussing the GL coding to use for income received is because it ties to the coding of cash receipts. All programs have designated staff members that compile payments received at the program or in the development team in order to receipt and deposit it. One of the requirements of receipting is to write the GL code on the receipt. So it's very important that you write the correct GL code on that yellow copy of the receipt so that when accounting receives the packet, the income is coded correctly. Please do not assume that accounting knows where it should be coded. It is up to the program or the development team to indicate where their income is coming from. You know more than we do. We double check and make sure, but we need that information from you to make sure that it's correct. Now I want to give a few examples to give you a chance to practice coding receipts and hopefully help you to understand your coding. The first scenario here is a payment received from a private pay client for services received from Daybreak in Central Florida, also called Miller Center. On the forward line of the receipt, you would write any information needed to help accounting to understand the coding selection that you've chosen. So on here it has Abby, client, daybreak. So that's what we would see. I'm going to give you a few minutes to give you a moment to try and code this receipt based on the information received. You can refer to the documents that you were instructed to print at the beginning of the training, and you'll need the general ledger account sheet, and you'll also need the location service code sheet as a reference. So, go ahead and pause the video and see if you can figure out what coding you would use for this receipt. Okay, so the information that was provided to you was that the client was paying for his or her services, the client attends Daybreak in Central Florida, and the service received was Adult Day Services. Based on that information, the account that you would use would be 30265, which was fees for individual. The location would be 0200, which is a location for Daybreak, or you also see it on there as Miller Center. And the service code would be 10, which is for Adult Day Services. How did you do? If you came up with that answer, you are correct. Let's try another one. Let's give you another chance to practice. So in this particular scenario, you have a private pay client that attends Camp Challenge, which service is a camp and recreation facility, and they've given a check of $400 to pay for services. On your for line, you've already written Johnny Jr. and Camp Challenge. So I'm going to give you a second to go ahead and select the coding that you would use for Camp Challenge. And the hint on this is that this program has its own AR account. So go ahead and pause the video and figure out what GL code and location you would use using your cheat sheets. Okay, so the information that was provided to you was that the client was paying for his or her services. The client was in Camp Challenge, and that the service received was camping recreation. Based on that information, the account that you would use would be 01442, which is the Camp AR account. The location would be 0000, and the service code would be 00, because that is what's used for all AR accounts. So anytime the account starts with a 01442, all of the rest of the numbers would be 0 as well. How did you do? If you came up with that answer, you're correct. Okay, one more practice. This is example 3. In this example, a donor made a donation to the development team for a Pair to Remember event in West Palm Beach, and they've given a check of $400. So you have on here, on your for line, you have a Pair to Remember West Palm Beach. What GL coding would you use? Go ahead and pause the video and look at your cheat sheets and see what coding you would use for this. Okay. So the information that was provided to you was that the donation was for a Pair to Remember event. The event was in West Palm Beach, and it was for the development team. So based on that information, the account that would be used would be 30059, which is Pair to Remember. The location would be 0600 because it's West Palm Beach, and the service code would be 17, which is always for development. So how did you do? If you came up with that answer, you are correct. So now we'll be talking about expenses. It is important to understand what the categories include when selecting GL coding to use for an expense. When reporting expenditures to different grants or funders, reports are created in the accounting software based on GL codes, locations, and service codes. If we report inaccurate information to our funders, we could lose the funding that we receive. Also, when hiring new employees or changing information for employees, HR needs to know the location and service code on the form. This is to ensure that the employee's payroll is being coded to the correct program. So you'll notice the expense accounts are used when you're coding purchase orders or petty cash reconciliations, new hire information, as well as payroll change forms. The next 2 slides shows the expense categories, their description, and examples of when this account category would be used. For instance, program supplies. Of course, program supplies are any type of materials or supplies that are directly related to specific programming. So if you're in a child care center and you buy crayons, or if you're in an adult day healthcare and you have to buy, you're buying the arts and wellness things for them to do artwork, or things like that. So you would put it under program supplies because the client will be using it, and so you notice on this description sheet, it has program supplies, it has the description, and then it has classroom and activity supplies, and it gives you some examples to know when to use that. Another one you'll see is professional fees. When I think of professional fees, you think of anything that a contract person comes in and does, and they're considered a professional. They're not a staff member of East South Florida. So purchase services from professionals or consultants, not employees of the agency, is a description of this. Legal fees, adult audit fees, staffing agency fees, any other like professional consultants. Let's say you hire a plumber or a janitor or a electrician, anything like that. Those would be considered professional fees. Some other things that you'll see would be meetings. There's a couple different categories for meetings. You have staff meetings, you have board meetings, you have meetings. It depends on the category. So if it's a staff meeting, that's any time this a meeting is involving just staff. It doesn't matter where the staff are, but just staff. Whereas just meetings could be if it's involving some other agency as well. So it's the cost of conducting or attending a meeting related to agency activities. It could be the meeting space, the equipment rental, the meals, all of that would go under meetings. Miscellaneous is one I wanted to bring to your attention. It says cost for expenses not reportable in other categories. We have a couple different miscellaneous accounts, like the one that says fingerprinting, license fees and fingerprinting, that is strictly for that. We have other miscellaneous as well. The account that's called other miscellaneous is not a catch-all category. It doesn't mean, oh, I don't know where this goes, so I'm gonna put it in miscellaneous. Only if there is not a category for it is when we would put it in miscellaneous. Now, just so you know, this particular expense category description is also in the corporate library if you ever wanted to print it out as a cheat sheet. So I'm going to go into that so you can see where to get that from. So we're going to close this sheet, and it's still in accounting forms and procedures, but I'll take you the long route. So you go to corporate library, accounting and financial, accounting forms and procedures, and then you look for expense category descriptions, and you'll see a list of multiple expense categories, all of their descriptions and examples of what to put. So you can either put a shortcut on your desktop or you can print it out. It will help you when sometimes you're trying to figure out where to code something and you're just not sure. It gives categories, to give examples so you can figure that out. The reason for the last few slides and discussing the GL coding to use for expenses is because it ties to the coding of the purchase orders. When creating a PO, the GL coding that is used is transferred to the accounting software and adds to the expense for your program on the financial statements. So it's very important to make sure that when you're selecting the GL account, location, and service code, that the information is correct. Those of you who have to approve others' purchase orders need to check the account codes used as well to ensure that they have been coded correctly before approving. As you may recall in the PO training, the account titles are noted at the bottom of the purchase order screen, so you don't have to memorize what each account stands for. So on this particular example, the selection was other professional fees, so that was the 43011, and it was for headquarters, and then the service code was early steps. But at the bottom, if you notice, it also has the description. So it has 43011, but it tells you what it is, and then what location and what service code. So you don't have to memorize them. You actually will see them on the purchase order. But here's another chance to practice your coding. I'll give you a few minutes to write down what you think. So the location is Murray Center. They create a PO for program supplies for their daycare services. What coding would you use? Pause the video and take a guess at it. Use your cheat sheets, and then you can resume. Okay, so if you put 44019, which is program supplies, 0500, which is Murray Center, and 03, your answer is correct. A form that supervisors have to complete that needs coding is the new hire / payroll change form. On this form, the only thing required is the location and service code. When entering this information, please keep in mind where the employee is working and the service capacity that the employee will be working in, because that will be their location and service code. For instance, if you have a new hire, and this example shows, let's say, a new hire that's working in a MAR in the child care capacity, you would select 0600 for a MAR and 03 for child care. Another thing to note on this form is allocations. If an employee is split between two different locations or service codes, you would need to specify all of the locations and service codes and percentages on this form. So if you have an employee that works half of his time at a MAR child care and the other half in Treasure Coast, West Palm Beach, you would divide his allocation between 0600-03 at 50% and 0105-06 at 50%. Okay, I have one final practice for you. The scenario is John Doe is promoted to a supervisor over Team Parent East and Team Parent West, 50% of each, so 50-50, which provide child care services, and his home location is Team Parent East. So if you look at your cheat sheets, and you can pause the video to figure this out, what would you write for John Doe's home location and service code? His home location is Team Parent East. The services is child care services. What would you write for his home location and service code? And then the second part is, what would you write for his allocation? Pause the video and use your cheat sheets. Take a stab at it. Okay, so if you chose for John's home location and service code 050403, and his allocation as being 50% to 050403 and 50% to 050303, your answer is correct. So just to recap, revenue, which is the payments, donations, and fundraising, is the recorded income for the organization. Expenses such as wages, supplies, occupancy costs are subtracted from the revenue, and this shows either the profit or the loss of the organization. In order to see the financial story of an organization, financial statements are used. The GL coding, location, and service code that you put on the cash receipts, the purchase orders, and HR forms are used to categorize the revenue and expenses in the general ledger and are reflected on the financial statements. Due to this fact, it is very important that when you are about to use a GL code, please take the time to think about the numbers that you are using and what they represent. Use this cheat sheets that I provided you, and when in doubt, please ask anyone in accounting and we will be happy to assist you. If there are any questions about this training, please feel free to contact me. My contact information is on this slide shown here. You can contact me or anyone else in accounting, and we'll be happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you for attending this training, and I hope that it's provided you with enough information to know how to handle, to know how to properly record your GL code, location, and service code for all your many things that you have to put them on. Thank you, and have a good day.